Hello, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you. And my talk today is going to be about hybrid learning and technology in distance learning or distance training. I am José Bidarra. I'm a professor at the Universidade Aberta in Portugal. And my research has been dealing essentially with communications, technology, and educational media for distance learning. We have been out of a pandemic very recently. For about 2 years, we were almost in lockdown for long periods, and we had to work and to learn at a distance in remote sites. Without leaving our homes and our places of work. And eventually what happened was that we became with the habit of a new normal under COVID-19. For example, the emergency remote work and teaching, the online peer and social interaction, doing online shopping at home, and seeking customer help from our computers. Digital equipment and network access became important so that we could interact online. And we were also facing security and privacy issues, as you know. So this is what we call the new normal under COVID-19, which affected us and changed quite the way we live today. Although the pandemic brought some questions as well, in the case of our research in teaching and learning, we question if the pandemic was a turning point in teaching and learning. Another question is if there was a transition to online learning and if that has been satisfactory. For example, we are now using this Zoom tool for distance communication, and this became an habit after the pandemic. What are the solutions and limitations of the models used? It's another question. What changed from a cultural and educational point of view? Is there a dominant pedagogical model for online or hybrid learning? And I'm going to talk about this later. This is very important, the pedagogical model, because not all of this is about technology. And finally, another question is, what challenges seek to persist in lifelong learning? These challenges have to do with the technology in one way, but also concerning the pedagogical model that we need to use. If you think about a pedagogical model, what happens today is a model that comes from the Middle Ages. It's a very old model, if you want. Because it's a one-to-many in a physical environment, the classroom. Knowledge always starts with the teacher most of the time. The teacher supplies the study resources to the students or to the trainees. Interaction is restricted in time and space. And student assessment is driven by the teacher, not usually by the student. So this is quite an old model that is now changing somehow with this new technology. The emergency remote teaching that I was talking about, and it was very common during the pandemic period. And myself, I've done many classes like this, like you are watching now. So I had my students online, and each student was at home or at work or in a home, trying to participate and interact with the online tools or the online platforms that were available. This is not really the ideal situation. It's just a mimic, a copy, if you want, of the classroom or face-to-face situation. So some emerging needs appeared during the pandemic. The first one was the access to technology for students and faculty. Not everyone had access to the technology. Some had to spend money and in equipment, and some technical means had to be in place. Also the pedagogical model, which became online essentially, or hybrid if you mix the face-to-face with the online models. And also the need for faculty development, how faculty use the new technology and the model, institutional change, how institutions were able to change in terms of flexibility and resilience so that they carry on working even when people were locked down at home. And cultural change concerning digital education. People did not accept digital education as valuable, as credible. And now this has changed, and now digital education is also part of university courses. Many teaching situations are now online, not only in the face-to-face or physical situation. So these needs became clear after the pandemic, and now we are implementing them in a broader way. I'm going to give you some framework. I call it a space-time metrics in terms of how we deal with the pedagogical model. We have coordinates for same time, same space, or same space, different time, or different space and same time. For example, the face-to-face classes like we have now, we are face-to-face doing a class, but we are each one of us in a different space. So we call it remote teaching. But this is the typical classroom environment, in the same space at the same time. The different time, same space is, for example, a lab, a library, a science center, where people go in a space in their own time. So the time is different, but the space is always a fixed location, in a fixed location. And if you think about the pandemic, this was out of bounds. So people could not leave their homes. So the same space possibility didn't exist. And people had to use either the different space like we are doing now or over the network, online events and virtual activities, or online interaction like synchronous activities, very flexible, anytime, anywhere, where students can produce work wherever they are in their own time. And this is the model in green that is more used by our universities, our online universities, for example. And in many training situations, it's very flexible and is the one that most people prefer. A recent research I've done during the pandemic years showed some interesting results. And this is just a background of the research. Some participants from Europe, a number of 8 participants from Australia and New Zealand, all these were interviewed to gather data on how they changed their habits and their ways of teaching and learning. There were some people from higher education, associations and networks, 2 interviews by video conferencing. Most of them were by video conferencing. Some were interviewed by email. And you can see I used an online transcription service, Otter AI, to transcript from audio from the conferencing to the text which we were used. Also, there was some natural language processing, so that would make it easier to process the data recording. So the first question they answered was about changes during the pandemic, what changes they were thinking about and what happened really. And most of them, of course, talked about the move to remote models online in a very short time. There was also mention of lecturers and students adopting new technology, new skills. Lecturers and students had to work from home, like I said before, and changes including the recordings of lectures and creating new videos altogether and rethinking interaction with students. Most universities were unprepared for an unexpected online teaching engagement. And this is interesting. Universities and institutions did not know what to do, but they started to use more and more the technology, and this was driven essentially by the lecturers. Diverging from Europe, higher education is very much run like a business in Australia. And because of the pandemic, hundreds of staff lost their jobs. This is interesting because in Australia and New Zealand, higher education, a bit like in the United States, is like a business. Students pay a lot of money to study at universities, and with the pandemic, because students could not go to the campuses, the staff were laid off, and many lost their jobs, in fact, and especially in Australia. What drivers and barriers was another question. There were pros and cons. Lecturers and students are now using Zoom and Teams proficiently. This means that these new tools became a habit, and people became more proficient in their use. The implementation of teaching programs based on online and hybrid learning, also an interesting proposition. And that was not accepted before, because online and hybrid was a second quality of teaching. Also, another pro is digital access to materials and support through technology. There became available more materials and the technology as well. Lecturers had to learn several technologies that they were not used to. And on the other side, there was a lack of adequate social contact among students and with lecturers. Also, another con, students were thinking, and teachers were thinking, that there was more superficial learning online rather than when it happens in a classroom. Academics are not competent instructional designers for online platforms. And in fact, most of the teachers, or the lecturers, they felt that they were not very professional, or very, there was not the same quality of teaching online as they were using in the classroom. What new experiences? Another question that was put to these interviewees. And first, the new experience was with tools, different kinds of tools. For example, Miro to facilitate graphical communication, Wonder, allowing teacher to set up different tracks. This was in Denmark. In Australia, the need for some sort of online activity like a workshop or practice, because students wanted more than recorded lectures. So just recorded lectures is not enough. They wanted to have some kind of practice. In Australia, an answer about the tools that we're using: Padlet, Ball Everywhere, Mural, Socrates, Slido. And most teachers and lecturers there were using these tools. They experimented with them, in fact. In the Netherlands, Jitsi, an open source alternative to Zoom that was used for lab sessions. And in the university was also using Q for online exams. I think this was in the University of Utrecht. No, the University of Delft in the Netherlands. At UNED in Spain, which is the open university in Spain, they developed a software for proctoring online exams. They have something like 800,000 exams in 1 year. And I know now that this was not very successful, but they in fact trying and develop something that could be used, and is now getting better. I think they are now improving this software. About community channels, so the question was what community channels were most used, or were they using. In fact, at the Open University in the UK, they didn't allow the use of Zoom, interesting enough. So what we are using now, they didn't allow it in the Open University because of data privacy issues. So primary vehicles were Adobe Connect and Microsoft Teams. This is a question of privacy and who is behind these tools and who can be listening to us while we are talking. The Chinese or a company listening. So this is the first time I've heard this kind of question, because most people were using Zoom, for example, and nobody talked about the data privacy issues. The use of WebEx, another platform in the Austrian institution. In Austria, also they were using Discourse as an online forum for the students. In Spain, they explored Teams and Sway, both services from Microsoft. Moodle is still the baseline platform here in Australia, but they also use Zoom, Teams, and Collaborate Ultra from Blackboard, depending on the institutions or depending also on the needs of the organization. Every week I use Zoom, Teams, Meets, Hangouts, or the Connect. This was in Spain. So you can see the kinds of platforms that we're using as communication. They were using, in fact, as communication channels during the pandemic period. The digital assessment. So how students get their marked assignments. In Austria, they use a customized Moodle system for assignments and exams. Here in Australia, the answer this person is not a believer in progressive assessment of portfolios. He is a big believer, of progressive assessment of portfolios, and is not a believer in exams. He thinks they are particularly useless. Of course, not all the subjects can be assessed through progressive assessment or portfolios. Depends very much on the subject matter. Assessment was based on portfolio assignments, so here in Denmark, so no exams or no tests. In Ireland, most people shifted from or canceled their exams and moved to continuous assessment, closer to what I've talked about. The proctoring infrastructure is a recipe for disaster, was one answer. And they don't want proctoring. And many lecturers and many institutions still don't like the proctoring because of the invasion of privacy. The proctoring system is a system on the computer that takes photos of the student to make sure that is the right person that is doing the exam or the test. So it in fact takes some images that belong to the private environment of that person. And there's quite a discussion about this. We relied essentially on grading case studies. This was another teacher from Australia. Grading case studies, the goal was to define cases where students could apply theory in practice. This is another way of doing some project work. In the Netherlands, this answer, we have relatively few proctored exams. Again, they don't want to go into proctor the exams, but we have developed several anti-fraud measures. One of them is post-exam interviews. So if they have doubts that a specific student has done something that is not correct or committed fraud during the exam, they can have an interview later on. The question of privacy and security, as I talked about, was very in the mind of these people. They were professors or lecturer teachers, and when running synchronous sessions like this one we are having now, for instance, participants were asked if they would accept recording for academic purposes. They have to give a consent. Another answer says before students enter any online examination, they must click or state that they agree the conditions. In this case, they have to click a button or say, yes, I agree. So that is a commitment of the student. An answer from Australia, with Zoom, there were issues, including students who weren't enrolled, attending, disrupting class, sharing the screen with pornography, or all those types of things. So there were some issues with security in Zoom in the beginning, and other people could get into a class and disrupt that class. I think this was solved later on. There has been an overreaction by a small community of educators because online proctoring must have a role in the future. So in New Zealand, they are in favor of online proctoring, and they say it must have a role in the future, but they acknowledge there has been an overreaction by many people. It's probably a decade or more. UCL, now we are in London. This is a professor from the University College in London and in the UK. And they have been using Moodle for students' assessments, keeping track of marks, records, etc. So nothing changed because of COVID-19 in that respect. This is the same in my university. In many open universities, we are using the platforms for testing and for exams, for assignments, and final assessment. So nothing really changed with the pandemic. In terms of faculty development, the question was if faculty or teachers or trainers were being receiving any training during the pandemic. A lot of webinars of staff training took place in the Open University in the UK. Here in Austria, we had many conferences and training on the job using WebEx. So people through the platforms or through Zoom were receiving training through the webinars. Even though I was completely overloaded with work, and this is another reason why many people didn't have training. Sorry, I went. So many people were so overloaded with work that they could not afford or could not spend more time every week with the webinars. But many people tried to at least one or two webinars. At Copenhagen Business School, every 2 weeks, there is a seminar on specific topics. Also here in New Zealand, there was a webinar series in response to the COVID-19 and introduced European and US contributors. Here in the Netherlands, also, they have a unit called Teaching and Learning Services that offered weekly webinars on a variety of topics. So there was a reaction to the conditions of the pandemic, and people were learning online education, online learning, online teaching, on how to deal with the new technology. This was, I think, one of the last questions. If they were using creative media, if there was some novelty in terms of more creative media. So here they said the new digital media really have a potential, but there was no time to explore. In UK Open University, the pandemic did not change the approach to instructional design. There's been a gradual shift towards making online content more engaging. This is the reason why we talked about creative media being more engaging, like using social media, social media that has images and videos, for example, that makes it more engaging for the students to get involved with the subjects. Now the answer here, we didn't have the time to invent new collaborative activities or anything creative, because during the pandemic, it's understandable, they were so busy trying to teach the courses that they could not invent something new or be more creative. The skills learners are required to evidence on completion determines whether new pedagogies are appropriate, not related to COVID-19. So it has nothing to do with the pandemic. All depends on the skills learners are required to evidence in the assessments. Some courses have invested in creating videos or creating a more blended experience, and they are more innovative in that way. But I would say since we've been so busy with online teaching that we couldn't focus elsewhere. And I think this is a summary of most reactions I got in the interviews, that people during the pandemic were so busy with the current work of teaching that they could not really focus in or explore different avenues. The question on digital transformation tried to figure out if the institutions were changing and their technology, their methodology. And in Austria, they say, this colleague of mine said, we have now more skilled teachers using e-learning technology. So more people got involved, of course, with the e-learning technology. Here in Spain, I don't think universities were really pushing for e-learning. It was more the need for this combination of online with face-to-face learning. So university was just surviving, if you want, and they were really not trying to change their way. And there was a need for the hybrid learning. The problem with people working at home is that they must be very serious, disciplined, organized, and diligent. Not often the case in Spain. This is an answer from someone who is in the distance education, in a distance education university, and she knows that people working at home usually need some kind of discipline and be organized, and people who work at home sometimes get lost doing different kinds of things, and they are not productive, in fact. The universities really led the digital transformation. The management boards really saw the financial situation, decided to move to online learning in Australia. So there was a move in universities for the digital transformation and in some investment in technology. And they really had to move to online learning to keep the students on campus. In the Netherlands, there was little pressure from politicians or even higher management within the university. Mostly it has been about lecturers wanting to provide the best possible experience for students. So it was a bottom-up tendency with the lecturers driving the solutions and the methods and the tools that they needed to teach their students. The last question, in fact, was this one. What happened? What happens, in fact, after the pandemic? How is distance learning or online learning be deployed and developed? And I collected some answers for you. Some of the habits will stay on to some extent, like more use of the internet for pedagogical purposes. Another question is that there is a danger that online teaching across the UK is set in a very cheap format, with the possibility that it becomes basically outsourced and online. So this was from a colleague in the UK Open University, and he was afraid that it was seen as a very cheap format and that they would save money if they would go into the e-learning model instead of just using the traditional teaching in universities. Parents and students have realized the importance of teachers and pedagogy in the new models. This is important because many parents and students were suspicious of the methods and the technology of distance learning. The social interaction in class is important and should be integrated with online learning. This is one of the issues that has been pointed out, is the lack of social interaction when we are using these tools, these online tools. The levels of social interaction is lower. And there's some ways you can improve this, like using social media, social networks, using some kind of activities where people get involved, but it's still not currently well integrated into online learning. And another question, one other answer was online teaching effectiveness will depend on the kind of academic subject. So it depends on the subject, the kind of effective teaching. The blended learning models and the habit of connecting via video conferencing are here to stay. So we are talking about blended learning and video conferencing, and this is definitely something that we are now using a lot, like we are using now. The future is going to be different for each institution according to its kind of leadership and its institutional culture. So, of course, universities have buildings, they have campuses, they have spaces, they have to pay rent, or they have to pay for the maintenance of the building. So, of course, they are not going to change to online models. If they have to, if they invest it, they have to make do with the structures they already have. So maybe we'll see a mix of that. And it's interesting to follow up, see what happens. So some lessons learned, and these are important now after the pandemic for people who want to use distance learning, or those who want to understand how to do lifelong learning through the new technology. First, technology has in fact become vital in helping to ensure that no one was left behind. The imposed digital transformation opened a lot of options for everyone, and we can see this very clearly. It has become clear that the use of streaming lectures alone is not an effective solution. So just streaming lectures without activities, without other resources or interaction with students is not really the best solution, like making videos. The hybrid model of teaching in higher education must be reviewed to maintain the quality of learning. And we have to think about the hybrid model, what goes online, what goes into the face-to-face situation, what is best in one way or in another way. Also, the traditional examination, the exam, needs to be replaced by more contemporary forms of assessment. I'm talking about exams or tests, multiple choice. How can we replace by, for example, portfolio, case studies, summative evaluation, where students have activities they perform in groups, and eventually they have an individual mark for each one. So this is still an interesting area of research at the moment. So after all this, you can think that many students had enough of Zoom, many teachers had enough of Zoom, of video conferencing. All this we are having now. It's very interesting because you can be in Paraguay, in the Netherlands, in Portugal, in Spain, but in fact, it's a bit heavy. If you have hours and hours every day of talking to a screen or listening to someone on a screen, it's not the best way. So what we need is a pedagogical model, and this is probably the best part and more interesting part for you. For a pedagogical model to be effective, we first need a context for hybrid learning. What is the context? Then we must identify the technology that is going to be used for that specific target, for the subject, etc. And then we must find the right pedagogy. What kind of pedagogy is the good choice for that context, for that technology, for those students or those trainees? And then we have to implement an effective instructional design. That means creating the activities, the objectives, the resources, etc. So let's see in more detail this model that was created with a colleague from the Open University in the Netherlands in 2017. And this was adapted now for lifelong learning. The first design duality that we have to think, this is about the context. Let's start with the context. The first one is formal and non-formal learning. What kind of learning is in place? Do we want it to be formal in a university, in an official organization, or non-formal? And so each one can use the learning modules in their own way. Here we need specification of topics, the kinds of activities, and how they fit together. For example, in courses, in a lab practice, a science club, field trip, etc. This has to be defined. The second item to be defined in context is if it is individual or collaborative learning. Are they going to work by themselves or in groups? A specification of study modes and related resources are important, so this can be defined both online and offline, allowing for learners interaction, project building. Examples are mind mapping, coding, designing, etc. So this gives you some context of the dualities that you can go if you are creating the context or defining the context for the teaching and learning. Also, if this is an open and closed learning environment. Open enclosed or open or closed. You can have a combination of free and restricted access. For example, we have a learning platform that is in an institution which is closed, because you need a password or probably have to pay a registration. But then you can use open resources that are outside and are free for each one to use. The other item is the technology. What kind of technology? You have design dualities, for example, like synchronous and asynchronous. And this is the time flexibility that I talked about in the time-space metrics. What kind of technology supporting learning interaction modes? Do we need video conferencing, like this one, which is synchronous? Everyone is on the same time listening. Or we go for synchronous learning, and they can download and access at their own time in each place. Virtual and physical settings. This is the space flexibility. What kind of learning environments? Hybrid do we have online and in class, in lab, in the field? What kind of technologies are supporting these items? It all depends also on the context, what the subject is, what the topics are. If you need to go to a hospital, it has to be physical, but some of it may be done online in a virtual mode. If it is a single platform and a multi-platform, you need one platform, one technology already in the form of a platform, or you can use different kinds of tools. For example, we have Moodle in my universities, but Moodle can be used in mobile phones. You can have plugins, you can have plagiarism check. There are other tools that can be used. Pedagogy, probably the most important, but it comes last here. What kind of theoretical and hands-on activities? So theory and practice. What kind of mix or activities mixed is used for hybrid learning curriculum? And this has to do with what we've seen before. So some is theoretical and some is practical, and they must integrate. What is compulsory and what is open? The activities can be structured, if you will, as, for example, multiple choice tests, tutor mark assignments, and these are compulsory, usually as are activities that the tutors or the lecturers can mark and give students a mark. But you can have open learning activities like games, simulations, portfolios, open discussions, and these are not marked. People are learning as well, but they are in an open learning format, if you want. So sometimes both are interesting and they can be combined. Is the design centralized? Sorry, if this is a centralized or open assessment. So the assessment of the trainees or the lecturers, is it centralized or open? Most of the time there is a teacher or a trainer assessing the students or the trainees, but often there is also an open assessment which can be done by peer assessment, self-assessment, and you can assess yourself, make a diagnose what you learned so far, for example, and can use it as a self-assessment. Oops, sorry. I think I jumped here. The last one in pedagogy is press-structured and open guidance. So is it a press-structured or an open-guided situation? For example, do we have support for the learning process, like tutoring? Is this video tutorials, mentoring and peer help, for example, which is open? Or do you have someone like a teacher that is giving a lecture and monitoring, tutoring as well, but in person? So basically, this might sound a bit complicated, but it all goes in line with this philosophy of connected learning, like having joining the interests of the students, the peer culture, how they fit in this digital culture at the moment, and then how the academic objectives are being accomplished. We have an example that I'm going to show you just later on. This is the kind of project that deals with innovative digital education and skills. And what we've done was to create a community of practice, for example, here. And on LinkedIn, we joined a group of people and we developed some modules that can be studied in a platform. You can actually go here to this link online, and these modules on different subjects are all free, can be studied by each one individually, don't need a teacher or a lecturer or a trainer. Each one goes step by step and learn on a specific topic. For example, 21st century skills, accessibility, blended learning, digital storytelling, digital tools for academic writing, distance learning and online learning. So in this project, many modules were developed that allow people to learn about the specific subject. One interesting idea that was developed here was the chatbot. We call it Ideas Bot, which is artificial intelligence behind the chatbot that can answer students on specific topics that are already pre-programmed. And for example, if a student has needs technical help, the chatbot can answer about the more typical answers concerning the technical stuff, and you can have immediately answers to issues like frequently asked questions, FAQs, if you want. But more interesting, we have the Ideas Bot, and the Ideas Bot is like the ChatGPT, if you know. You write a question, and the artificial intelligence system will answer you with an explanation on a specific topic. And this might help when the student is learning and there is nobody else there, and he needs a very close answer to a specific topic. But this brings us, I just mentioned ChatGPT, and I think artificial intelligence is probably the way we are going now. And what we are looking for is to give each student a specific model of learning. So the system can answer each student individually and not give just one model for everyone. And this can be possible because of artificial intelligence. And for example, in education scenarios with intelligent processes, smart classroom collaboration, connected school devices, personalized content pickers, personalized learning dashboards where all the information is appearing, learning bots powered by learning bots. And there are many variants. The arrival of artificial intelligence has been growing since maybe 2016. This is from Microsoft. 2016, the object recognition, 2017, speech recognition, then 2018, reading comprehension was more developed, then machine learning for translation, which we are using a lot. If you use the DeepL, is the world's best translator, and can translate to any language using machine translation, speech synthesis, near human speech synthesis, language understanding. And now we are getting into the best, crème de la crème, if you want, what we call now the ChatGPT, which is a chatbot that interacts in a conversational way. And the dialogue is possible because he answers questions, admits mistakes, and uses a very human language, if you want. Of course, it makes mistakes and it makes errors that can be corrected later, but it is a great help for development of courses, for example. So why am I talking about artificial intelligence? just because it is getting to grow, and we are having to work with it. So I think we have to learn with AI, what are the tools that we are using for students, for teachers, for the system, for our organizations, what tools. That is learning with AI. Is in our learning we are using artificial intelligence like the chatbot GPT. Then we must learn about AI, how it teaches people, what are the questions of ethics, for example. How far can we go? Questions of privacy, of plagiarism, how it is going to be used by teachers and engineers and technicians, etc. And also we have to learn for AI, learn to live with AI. In fact, learn about the future. What can we do with AI that makes us humans and can solve many of our problems in the future. Other technologies also are emerging, like blockchain, for example, in universities, for the security of the records. Virtual reality, the metaverse is a talk as well. Virtual reality is fine for health sciences because it gives you the possibility of creating something that is very similar to reality and can be worked in training, serious games, and video platforms. Now, after the pandemic, we are using these platforms like this one, the Zoom platform we have now. And it's also interesting that we can mix the platforms with the face-to-face teaching and learning. So all this to say that we need to have some digital literacy, not only teachers and students, but everyone, and with the ability to navigate in our digital world using reading, writing, technical skills, critical thinking. So essentially it's using technology to find, evaluate, and communicate information. And it's for all of us. That's why we need this training. We need to be trained, and we need to upgrade our skills. And upgrading our skills is essentially ICT proficiency, with using the digital tools, for digital creation, problem solving and innovation, for communication and collaboration, for learning. We have to evolve, we have to learn with these tools, and also to gather information, data, and have access to media literacies. So this is where we should go. This is an interesting source, and we have to do it every year, because every year the technology is evolving. And if you have something like a pandemic or a new disease or a new problem in the world, most probably we can solve it through these kinds of resources. So we don't know what's coming. We had COVID-19, we might have a recession or a climate change catastrophe. So we really need to go on and take care of our education. And this is not the learning of facts, as Albert Einstein put it. It is the training of the mind to think. And I'll leave it to you to think about this, because this is how we have to focus on what we are learning and how we have to go. And now, after all this theory, I think I'll go into the practice, and I'll stop sharing this. I'll show you another screen, and let me just get an example of the course that you can work on. Sorry, let me just get this one. Okay, so as you can see now, I went to the platform, the smart learning platform of the project that we were developing in my own university, and there are many modules. As you can see, there are quite a few modules here, and there are more in the next page. And for example, let's suppose you want to learn about blended learning approaches. So let's click on the blended learning approaches. Let me just say that you can have access to this through that link that I gave you before. And you just have to do a registration. The login is free. You don't have to pay for this. And you can study each module at your own pace. You just need to log in and to start using it. So each module, I'm not going to study through the module because it would take a long time, but each module will have an introduction with the objectives. What are the objectives? So this is micro learning, so it's a very short piece of learning. The objectives are 4 here, for example, concerning blended learning. We have 4 objectives. Then getting started. What is blended learning? It's about good pedagogy. There's a mix of face-to-face and online instruction. So it gives you a definition. Then you go through a self-assessment quiz. And if you click here, you can have a self-assessment, and you can answer the self-assessment. So you can tell the system and yourself if you know what you know really about this topic. You just have to click on each of the answers. I'm not doing it right. I'm just clicking randomly. And in the end, you can finish the attempt and click finish, and it will give you an answer. I'm going to leave now so I can keep this for later use. So the self-assessment quiz will give you an account of the areas where you should focus, and also will give the system some feedback. Then you have a first video which is covering the topic of blended learning and its benefits. Then you'll have a second video covering a second topic, building trust, and about blended learning approaches, productivity, engagement, behavior. I'm not the one who created this module, so I don't really know exactly what is in it. I'm just showing you briefly. And as you can see, you have one video and material to discuss each video. For example, here it's about Kahoot. It's one of the tools that you can use for blended learning. And then it explains you how to get Kahoot to be used. Go to Kahoot Learning Games, click Create, type your first question, and gives you a step-by-step guidance on how to use the tool. If you go to Nearport, the same thing. You get a few items you can follow up. Then another tool, ThingLink, and you can also use this and try this one. And Jamboard the same. And then you have another video. So these are interactive activities because you are using the tools, and you learn a new tool, and you know the objectives and how you can use it. Then you have a final video, for example, here, and it's about promoting digital collaboration, which is interesting if you have those tools and you have the knowledge of those tools already, and you are promoting digital collaboration with your trainees or your students. And this is how it works. And you have also another tool called Class Notebook. You have another one called Wakelet, another one Flipgrid, Padlet. So these are the new tools that came along with the pandemic, and some of them were available before. And then you finish your study. This is micro learning, so it will take a few hours, not much, studying this, and then you can finish with a quiz. And after you finish the quiz, you receive a grade. If you pass, fine, you can have a certificate. Or if you don't receive a pass grade, you have to go back and study again. Eventually, you can have a certificate of completion, but this is only restricted to people who have completed and passed the module. So the module is conceived in a way that you have to go step by step and finish the final quiz, And then if you have a pass grade, you can have a certificate, and you can keep a certificate. Most modules also have extension activities, so you can further your study through other topics. For example, here, teaching blended learning environments, teach online course, developing blended learning approaches, create a welcoming and inclusive online community. Inclusive online community is also an interesting subject here. Now, remember that I talked about the chatbot within artificial intelligence. If you click here on the right, you can have access to the ideas chatbot, and it will ask you, hi there, get started. Hello, I'm ideas bot, how can I help you? And now you can ask a content question, for example, or you can get started. Let's see. Well, let me, technical help. Let me write here, technical help. And I need technical help about navigation. How do I get back to the home page? How do I find a course, for example? You are not already enrolled in a course, you can search for it by name and description. So he knows that I'm not enrolled because I didn't log in. I'm not enrolled in a course. So the system detected that I'm not enrolled. I had to go to do the login properly, like you have in the site when you arrive. But let's see now. I want to ask a content-related question. Okay, I'm going to click here, and the system will ask me about something. I can ask the system about something. For example, what is online learning? And ask me. You click here, and it is going to tell me that online learning is a type of learning where students access learning materials and resources from the comfort of their own homes or offices. This type of learning can be done in a traditional classroom or online course format. So this is what we call the blended learning situation. And I have a pretty good idea. Of course, I knew this from before, but I can refresh, and I can ask another question. Concerning online learning, for example, what is flipped learning? Flipped learning. What is flipped learning? We didn't talk about this. Let's see if I can get an answer. Flipped learning is a pedagogical approach that uses the flipped classroom model to teach students in a digital environment. In a flipped classroom, students watch lectures and complete assignments online, then discuss the material with classmates in real time. This approach helps students learn a more interactive and engaging way, and they can ask questions and get help from classmates while they are learning. Okay, fine. This is a great answer. So, as you can see, this is a way of dealing with different situations. I can have pre-recorded or pre-programmed answers, or I can go to the, I want to ask a content-related question, and I get the chatbot to answer me about something that is interesting in one of these modules that I'm studying. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to end this here because I've been talking for a long time. And this gives an idea of how we can study through online learning. We can go to one of these modules and we can take something for ourselves. And I think this probably is the best practice we can have, not just listening to a video or to someone talking about the subject, but go to the models and interact yourself with the system, try to think about it, and try to get to the end, and you can actually get a certificate. And I'm finished now. Thank you very much for your attention.